Jakim Show. Peace and blessings. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim Show. Can't get enough of the Hard Talk with Jakim Show? You can email us at btom6164@gmail.com. That's bthomp6164@gmail.com. Peace. Peace. This is Jakim from the Hard Talk with Jakim Show. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter at The Real Jakim. That's at The Real Jakim. Remember, no punks allowed. The views expressed at or through this broadcast is those of the individual host and guests in their individual capacities only. The information provided on this broadcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and material available on this broadcast are for general informational purposes only. All viewers should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any and all legal matters. Peace and blessings, family. This is Jakim for the Hard Talk with Jakim. Listen, we've got our guest host today, Miss Donyale Hall. I'm glad to have her. This is part 2 of our domestic violence and the courts. If you didn't see part 1, you need to go on to Delaware Info Now. That's on YouTube, Delaware Info Now. You need to hear Donyale's compelling story of the how she's dealing with the court system here in Delaware and also around the world. Doesn't matter where you're at, because I'm hearing stories. Listen, if you sent me some stuff through the email, and you know our email is btom6164, that's bthomp6164. I got so much stuff in the last week. I mean, last week we had James Spadola about nepotism. We had him on about Wilmington City Council, why his bill didn't pass. But I got so much stuff about domestic violence. And again, this is part 2. So again, I'm welcoming Donyale Hall here today. Again, thank you for coming.
It's great to be here.
You know, we've got a rainy day here in Delaware. If you're in Texas, and yes, Texas, we had 2 guests that's supposed to come on in June, but they'll be on in July, because we're going to talk about Governor Abbott's diversity thing and yada, yada, bada, bada, boom. We wanted to talk about it in June because Juneteenth and, of course, Galveston, Texas being associated with it. But the grid system, the power grid system in Texas is so bad that we're going to have to do it in July. Hopefully they'll have it up there. But big shout outs to all my people in Houston, all the people in Dallas that have been sending me stuff. So we're going to get into our domestic violence and the courts part 2, y'all. So let me just say this. When we hear all of these, and you know it, and we've heard Donyale's story, and I've heard a lot of stories through my emails. But when we hear these domestic violence stories, they are painful to hear. But I want to let you know it's even more painful to live through, because however, when you go through a domestic violence, and people I know have been talking to me about it, and Donyale's gonna chime in on it, it sets you up in motion to do things that you never thought you would be able to do, because you were in one set of a mind frame. So Donyale, you can take it from there.
Well, I thank you for having me.
Yes.
I think Noah probably would relate to the struggles today, because I felt like I had to build an ark. Your street is a little flooded, just a little flooded. So I'm thankful that I was able to make it up and make it up safely. For those of you who are on Route 1, the 95 corridor, anywhere around Route 13, please, please, please drive slow and safe. I almost got taken out a couple times on my way up. So
wow, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm glad you made it safely.
Yes.
That's a big thing, y'all. Here in the planet of Dunleith in Delaware, on the top of our street there, they haven't done anything, and it's been like that for 17 years. I've complained. I've done my thing. We'll see what the community is going to do about it. But go ahead, Daniel.
So it's been quite a few things happen over the last 3 weeks since we were here together. I have had some clapback from being able to have given some of my story, although I didn't mention any names specifically about my abuser's name, about any of the court commissioners or judges. I've heard quite a few things about those remarks that I made. All things are true and non-defamatory if they are based and rooted in fact. And I have revealed nothing but fact on this show. Having said that, I know we talked a little bit about the process. And one of the things that I really kind of wanted to jump in and do a deeper dive today, this evening rather, is about how when you come in to a situation as a victim of domestic violence, that first encounter that you have with authorities regarding your issue is imperative that you have some knowledge about what to anticipate and expect. Now, I know that when I put out the post for today's show, I said, please share. Somebody is probably sitting and suffering in silence. They need to get help. And so for those people who may be entertaining and getting out of their domestic violence situation, being strategic about how you embark upon that journey is crucial. You need to understand what you can expect going to the authorities about reporting your acts of abuse. You need to understand that when you arrive at the police station, you might be in a state of trauma. You need to understand that you need to be patient with yourself, and you need to understand how to navigate that process, because those very first moments in reporting your incident is crucial on how they are documented and captured on paper. And so after you have given your statement to a police officer, you may be given some information, and you'll be given a wealth of information as to who you could go to for resources for domestic violence situations, support, advocates, the whole 9 yards. That advocate is more than not a trained legal professional, and they will do the best to point you in the right direction. But just like the disclaimer for your show,
yes,
this is not to circumvent legal advice or to be misconstrued as legal advice. So you will have to figure out that piece. And that's one of my biggest concerns. When you go in the midst of your trauma, you're trying to grapple with whatever emotion you may be struggling with surrounding whatever has happened, and to be able to think in the midst of that is a trauma in and of itself.
Oh, yes.
And so when you speak with that person that you might come into contact with on what kinds of protections the law may allow you through the court system, you need to understand that this is a two-pronged process. There are the criminal charges, and oftentimes that is going to follow a criminal track that's in an altogether different court,
yes,
than the mechanism that you need to keep you safe from abuse, and that is a protection from abuse order that you have to seek out through family court. And if you are like me and your matters are on two separate tracks, these courts do not speak the same language and don't converse with one another and don't overlap. And so you need to understand that that is a separate process as well. So when you go to ask for a protection from abuse order, you can do what's called an ex parte motion, which can be granted on an emergency basis. You will capture all of the details, and it's very important that you leave nothing out. So if you know that you are in a high state of emotion and you may think that you may not remember everything all at that one moment, sometimes it can be better to just hold off filing that paperwork until the next day.
Now, we do our disclaimer. We want everybody to go out there and get legal advice. We want you to get that. And a big shout out, I just see on the comments that we got a big shout out to Dawn Riley and the DVA Lions Club. And yes, you're absolutely right, Dawn. You're absolutely right about the consequences for violating or not paying the money, whatever. That's an issue that we're going to address a little bit tonight. But what Donyale is saying is, and essentially, use everything that you got to do. But if you're in a highly emotional state, that is the wrong time. Really the wrong time for you to really have clarity in what you need to put down on paper. So if you need to take a moment and maybe use, and this just is common sense advice, this ain't legal advice, but it's common sense advice. If you need to take out your phone and maybe dictate, I always say the best meditation I've ever done, and people have seen me, and I used to teach martial arts and Tai Chi Chuan. One of the best meditations I ever done in my life was writing. So writing actually helps me meditate, helps me clear my thoughts, helps me to get those thoughts out there. So it may help you also. You're saying, if you're in that highly emotional state, don't do the ex parte right then. Again, when we talk about the PFAs here in Delaware, in your municipality, it may be called order for protections or something else, but that's exactly what we're talking about.
So again, you want to compose your thoughts. And the reason why that's important is because if you leave out a detail, you cannot bring it back. Oh. And when you get into court, if you didn't list it in such a way to where it was broad enough, then you may not be able to introduce a very critical piece of evidence in your case. And I got bit by that pretty badly, so I can share the horrors of what happens. And you need to also make yourself aware of the timelines of the court. When you go in and you have an emergency hearing, if for say that is granted to you, you need to pay attention to the timelines of what comes next. And so if you know that you're supposed to have a hearing within say 10 days, then you need to be adamantly making sure that that happens, because if you end up in a situation like I did, and I know there were some extenuating things going on with some of the ability of the court to work through COVID and all of that. So I know there were some extenuating circumstances, but my matter didn't get back into the courts until almost a month later. And sometimes that can be a detriment, because when you captioned your incident and you captured all of the facts surrounding your incident, sometimes, just like I said, in the last 3 weeks, a lot has happened. Right. So you kind of lose your ability to capture some of those things. And so I ended up in a situation to where after he's been convicted of assaulting me, after he's been convicted of child abuse, I was left absent a protection from abuse order because of some of these hiccups that happened by the way that it was captioned when I originally filed my documents. So it's very important.
So what Donyale is saying is these mistakes, these hiccups, these things will hurt you. And as a victim of abuse, you don't want the courts to have any reason not to believe your story or not to give you the full extent of the law. Because quite frankly, I've seen it and you've seen it. They will give the abuser every opportunity to try to wiggle out of this stuff. This is what they do. That's what they do. I've seen it. I've lived it. I don't have to tell you about it, but if you know my background in law enforcement, I've seen it. They will give the abuser every single way to wiggle out of it. So you got to, dot your I's and cross your T's, and you have to be consistent. And I'm going to say, what do you say about that?
Absolutely. When you go in for your matter, and this is one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about today on today's show, was where the loopholes in the law and the statutes have to be closed. One of the things that I absolutely cannot stress has been the most heart-wrenching is watching people be unable to access the justice system because it's cost prohibitive. So if you are coming in and you are not able to afford an attorney, if you are say on the respondent side. So your abuser may have gotten to the court first and filed something. Whether it is truthful or not, at that point, your abuser is the petitioner and you are the respondent. In that particular scenario, even though you may qualify for legal aid, because you are the respondent, you cannot get legal counsel to represent you at no cost. So at that point, you're stuck in a situation to where you have nobody to represent you, even though you are innocent. And it's sad because you are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but just because somebody makes an allegation against you doesn't necessarily make it right. And I've had that happen to me twice.
Now, before you continue on that thought, let me just say this. If you're out there right now and you thinking that just because you're a woman that they're automatically going to take your side in the courtroom, you are sadly mistaken. It has nothing to do with men and women as more than it does who gets there first, who seems to be credible, who's got the hookup in the courts, who's got the hookup in the police department. It's more that than anything else. And I'm going to tell you from both sides. I've seen it. I've taken people to family court in New York City and New York City Department of Corrections, DOC, and I've taken them as prisoners there or inmates. And it's been you'd be surprised on some of the decisions that I have listened to in the courtrooms and some of the stuff that I've seen. One thing I do want to go to, and yes, we're going to talk about legislation. One of the things that we have found out in the long road, if you're an adult on this planet for any amount of time, you know that it's a hookup. A lot of times politicians are in the pockets of certain groups. Now, both of us have been in the political game, and we know the political game. And I'm telling you right now, we have a culture where men are safe until they're not safe, and women are unsafe until they're not safe. And that culture says that they are going to give the abuser as much leeway as possible. Now, I know we got some legislation you wanted to get to, and we're going to get right back to it. And I just wanted to answer something that Dawn Riley said. And that self-defense laws. Yes, you're absolutely right. She's a big advocate here for DVA here in Delaware. And yes, the victims get nothing and criminals get everything they need for freedom. Yes, Dawn, I've seen that. I can see where that, that culture is there. I'm going to let y'all in on the secret. That culture is there. If you think it's a secret, it ain't a secret, believe you me. But we're going to be right back, and we're going to try to talk about a little bit of legislation. Remember, this is not a D or R thing. This is not a Democrat, Republican thing. We're just talking about common sense, good governance. We'll be right back, y'all, with the Hard Talk with Jakim show. Listen to this real quick, and I'll be right back.
So in America, we do have a stereotype of what is a criminal, right? The media portrays criminals as from urban areas, from low socioeconomic status, involved in criminal subcultures, less educated, right? And make no mistake, this is done to shift the blame for society's problems from those in power to those without any power. And now today we have the arrest of Bryan Kohberger for arguably one of the most gruesome, brutal murders this year. This is him. He's a PhD student. He had already received a master's in criminal justice, and apparently while he was studying for his master's, he went on a subreddit and solicited information for one of his research projects.
All right, y'all. Yeah, y'all know that story, and that is in the courts right now. So the story of that guy from Pennsylvania who went out west and killed all of students, you know it. 85% of crimes committed in the United States are committed by white folks, especially all other white folks. But the local press won't let you know about that. They will love to do the same type of crime thing. Let me just say this before we move on. When we was talking about Donyale earlier, about gathering your thoughts and putting your stuff on paper, a lot of times we do self-inflicted wounds because we don't know the process. And that's why it's so important to gather your thoughts and put every detail down. Don't be reckless. Don't think that just because the cops is there, they're automatically on your side, or the courts is automatically. That's reckless. You have to make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot, that you don't have self-inflicted wounds, that you put everything down. So I know we were talking about legislation, so I'm gonna let you take it from here.
Well, some of the things that I've kind of felt about this situation, and it kind of leans into my own personal issue. Some of the things that have recently come out in proposed legislation and bills. One of them is Senate Bill 4. And so Senate Bill 4 is an act to amend Title 11, Title 13, and Title 29 of the Delaware Code relating to the criminal justice system, including probation. One of the things that I would like to say about this point, there have been things that when my situation gave rise, after this last go round, when he was arrested, there were 3 criminal charges, and also a violation of probation because he was currently on probation for the assault in my case. And so had it not have been for some of the latitude that the probation and parole office had in their purview, they would not have been able to have increased the amount of money for his bail conditions.
Wow.
And so
wow, that's deep.
It's very deep. And actually, that was the reason why he was detained pending the outcome of his trial, because that amount was cash bail, and it actually was what kept me and my girls safe throughout the ordeal. So through the course of this process, some of these bills that have come out, and I have been talking a lot with my local legislators about what we can do to close some of these legal loopholes that give more protections to people who find themselves victims of domestic violence, things that would offer more services at the time they come in and seek them, like legal access to legal counsel. There's way more that we can be doing that would be proactive as opposed to reactive. It's a shame. It's a sin and a shame that so many people have to be severely hurt or lose their lives before the right light is cast on the situation. And I think that we can do a far better job creating proactive policies that would afford people access to the legal system to be able to mitigate some of these things that I'm finding most people just don't have. Like we talked about when I had to hire an attorney, I had to call on a credit card to be able to do that,
And I'm going to piggyback on that. One of the things that we're saying is that there are a lot of people who are in jail wrongfully. I'm going to, on this show, and I advocate for that. But there are people that are in jail right now that should be in jail. I'm letting you know something here. We're not going to overanalyze things and put policies out there that are going to put people's lives in jeopardy. And no matter how you want to say it. I know so many people, I hate that term when somebody tell me that I'm pro-black, because I'm not pro-black. I'm pro-humanity. More than anything else, I want black folks to be rise up. I just want our due. I want our reparations. But that does not mean letting people out of jail who should be in jail. That does not mean that. It's all right to be, as Malcolm would say, it's all right to have been arrested once or twice. But it's not all right to be arrested 15 times. That's a criminal. especially if it's in the mode of criminal actions. So this bill that Senate Bill number 4 for this year for 152 General Assembly, I love the lady who sponsored the bill because she has a good heart. But we overanalyze a lot of things. And when we overanalyze, we usually make a lot of mistakes in your life. So I'm just saying I would rather for them to go back on that bill and really think about what they're doing. I'm an advocate for the community and for civics. Both of us are, but don't do dumb stuff. That's what my granddad used to tell me, and that's what my dad tells me. Don't do dumb stuff. And this bill, as it is written now in Delaware, is dumb stuff.
Well, I think the problem is that oftentimes we have the right intention and we lack the knowledge to be able to execute it properly. And I think that comes from a lack of bringing the stakeholders to the table to talk about what needs to be done before the proverbial cart is put before the horse.
Well, we could debate on that, and we're going to have a discussion about politics. We're going to have our roundtable, but I'm going to tell you, I think some of the reasons why we get these crazy whacked out bills like that from these dingleberries, especially here in Delaware. We get a lot of these dingleberry bills because the people who are paying for them to go into office want this thing to show that they're doing stuff. It's all political grandstanding to me. So a lot of I really see their consistency of patterns of putting out dingleberry laws like that and whack jobs laws like that. In fact, I just spoke this week for lead in the schools. Here, they had a bill that was in the committee, and why we need to have more lead testing in Delaware. Biggest shout out to Sarah and Amy. Y'all know who you are. You do a great job. Thank you. But I spoke out about it, and then I was really taken back. I wasn't surprised, y'all. I was taken back, but by the physicians and the nurses associations here in Delaware that push back on this bill. Well, we don't need to have that in our thing. And we don't need to have more of that for the doctors to do. And I'm saying to myself, if we don't take care of the children, we have no future. The physician association was doing that. So in the same frame of mind, these types of bills goes on with that. And yes, Dawn, Dawn said, "Oh boy, tell me." Yeah, I love it. You're absolutely right, Dawn. There's some things that go on, especially in our political situation for our victims of domestic violence, that I don't even think they even talk to domestic violence advocates. What do you say?
I agree 100%. I've actually called several times to sit in the presence of the sponsor of this bill. I've managed to reach out in several different methods to let her know that I was anxious to tell her why it is important that probation and parole, when they address things out of the courts, that probation absolutely needs to be punitive. So many times you find that when these things are adjudicated through the court system, when there is a plea offering in play, it is in lieu of jail time. So in order for them to actually pay a penalty for their crime, and it is a crime.
Yes.
Punitive means a penalty. It's a punishment. And so there has to be a punitive measure that is now going to be carried out through probation as opposed to level 5 jail time. So we absolutely have to have that. And for these probation officers to be able to do their job, they have to have the resources in place to be able to execute. And so I think that our dollars here in the state of Delaware could be better spent giving the resources that they need to be able to facilitate some of these things. One of the things that I have found to be egregious in my situation, because my abuser was sentenced to probation, he's level 3, he has a GPS ankle monitor, that is overseen. Thank you. That is through electronic monitoring. Okay. And some of those people are not trained well enough in domestic
violence.
And so when you come to that probation officer with things that are concerning about the domestic violence aspect of it, they may not be necessarily versed well enough to be able to handle some of those things. So I think that, again, well-placed resources could allow for there to be overlap between those domestic violence probation officers to be able to work hand in hand with the electronic monitoring probation officers to be able to get the right mix to be able to help.
I agree.
The rehabilitative process of the offender and also be a resource for the victim.
I agree 100%. And yeah, you're right, Dawn. They spent the whole last session writing a separate human trafficking PFA. The original one states 100 yards away, so it was already covered. You're right. Our legislators do go over the same old thing. It makes it seem like they're doing something, and they really not, especially when we have such a major election period coming up now for 2024 that we got so many people running, and they'll automatically come up and say, I've done this, I've done that, and really they've done nothing. So we're going to keep their feet to the fire. Yet that is correct. And remember, we're going to have Sister back on not only for domestic violence, but we're going to have a political roundtable. We're going to be talking about politics here in Delaware, here in New Jersey. Listen, New Jersey, I didn't forget about you. I know I got 3 emails this week from New Jersey. Jakim, what are you talking about? We're going to talk about it, because let me just say this about New Jersey and being right across the river from us. New Jersey seems to be a little bit more progressive on a lot of things that are important. And yet, soon as you put your faith in that political government, they come back and do something stupid like what they're doing with New Jersey Transit over there in New Jersey and the New Jersey Transit headquarters. Yes, I'm going to talk about that. Thank you for sending me those emails, man. All I want is the truth. And all Sister Donyale wants is the truth, that we get better system to protect victims of domestic violence here in Delaware and across the nation. We need better systems. The system that we have right now is not working. I have seen too many people lose their lives because they gave these people too much latitude when they shouldn't have, and then they give the people who should be under a tight leash all this space to kill you. So I don't know. What do you say about that, sis?
You brought up a very interesting point about that 100-yard thing. So that's something that I have intimate concerns with. I have had troubles with my abuser lurking just beyond the 100 yards. Now, for you all who don't really know what 100 yards is, it's a straightaway on a track.
Yeah, it's not that far. It's a football field. Far.
It's maybe 6 houses down from where I live.
Right.
And so if I can see him, he could see me. And one of the things that I have asked about is, well, how do we get that modified? And
how do we get it longer?
Exactly. And so what I've been told this week, as a matter of fact, is that it can only be 100 yards. I think we need to revisit that. That's one of the things that I say, we can do better in our legal system by defining some things that give people more of a cushion between line of sight.
You're absolutely right. Because 100 yards, I don't know, I played football and basketball and baseball. Baseball was my major sport. 100 yards, when you look at 100 yards on television, when you're watching the Eagles here in Delaware, or you're watching the Giants up in New York or New Jersey, it looks big until you get on that field. And then you say, man, 100 yards is like right there. It's 100 yards is not enough for somebody who may be allegedly strangled somebody, pushed somebody, punched them in the face, beat them down, whatever the case may be, allegedly. 100 yards is nothing. And believe you me, you can stalk somebody from 100 yards. You can easily stalk somebody from 100 yards. This in Delaware, we need to push this for the next session. Of course, the session is getting ready to end in June 30th. So at the end of the month.
You know what? Senate Bill 4 is on the floor for public comment on the 28th. So we'll get a chance to chime in.
That's okay. So we're going to put that
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
On the
public comments on the bill, Senate Bill 4.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna put that down on my thing. I'm gonna make sure that I put my public comments to it. Hopefully, it doesn't get passed as is. And if it does get passed, it should be passed with a lot of revision, and hopefully we can get something on there. Let me just say this. And you know what I'm going to talk about, and we're still in this remote, and I see we've got a lot of comments, and I see the comments. Keep the comments coming. Remember, this is going to be on Delaware Info Now, 24 hours from now. So you can go to Delaware Info Now, YouTube, subscribe to Delaware Info Now. Doesn't matter whether you live in Delaware, Texas, New Jersey, all this stuff matters to you. Let me just say this on one thing. We've got a lot of gimps in politics, especially here in Delaware. And I'm not just picking back and picking on Delaware. New York got them too. New Jersey got them too. But we got a lot of gimps in empty suits. And a lot of these gimps that's in empty suits are running for a particular office. If you have have any compassion for people that are victims of domestic violence, I want you to make sure that you call and get on the phone to your elected officials and tell them that you have to strengthen the laws to help victims of domestic violence. What do you say?
Amen.
Now, we live in a culture where we don't protect our children. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, in the United States of America, and I believe all over the world because I've traveled, but we have a culture where the priest is abusing the children, the teachers abusing the children, the school nurses, not school nurses too much, teachers abusing, coaches, stuff like that. But here's what I'm going to say about domestic violence in this context. If you were corporal punishment when you were growing up, and a lot of us have had corporal punishment. Some of it's been good to you because it made you give discipline. Some of it's not. Some of it was just plain abuse. So I saw a lady talking to another lady about domestic violence, an advocate on television. And one of the things she said was she was talking to the young lady, and the young lady was writing a book about domestic violence and all this other stuff. And the lady who she goes to for information asked her, I know that you've had a rough childhood. And the lady said, yeah, they used to line us up and beat us. And after the beating, I can't even remember why I got beat so bad. All I remember is being angry that I got beat, that I had to do this or whatever. And the lady asked her, who was a domestic violence advocate and a victim of domestic violence, said, do you know you may be a victim of domestic violence? We have 18 states in this country that still allow school districts to manage corporal punishment. 18 states out of our 50 states still allow that. Now, don't get me wrong. We grew up on that whole thing, spare the rod, spoil the child. We grew up on that. And I will tell you about, even in my own childhood, there was about 4 or 5 that I can remember that I don't think I deserved. I don't think I deserved. I ain't gonna lie to you. Oh, there was some that I deserved. Don't get me wrong. Growing up in Brooklyn, there was some that I deserved. But and we just have to get out of that thing. That the world that we used to have does not exist anymore. And when I hear that domestic violence abusers abuse the kids as well as their intimate partner, and yet they're allowed to go back and use the court system like that. It just pisses me off. What do you say about that, sis?
Well, just for clarity, the Board of Corrections at my elementary school hung on my principal's wall. It was a nice paddle.
Oh my Lord! Yes, yes.
But you know what? In all fairness, I think that it was enough to see that, and the fear of getting it to keep some of us in line, right?
You're absolutely right. And even with growing up and having your own children, you notice that some of your children that works for.
It does, and some
of them it does not work. It will not work, and all you're doing is creating a problem for us down the road. Yes. So I'm just going to say that we all live in a box that we call culture. And a lot of us think that culture means food and entertainment and music. No, culture is a little bit more than that. It's how you feel about justice. It's how you feel about fair play. It's how you feel about a fair system. Culture is more than that little box. And sometimes we have to come out of our box thinking that everything works for us should work for somebody else. And that's the only way we're going to really expand and understand other people's cultures.
Well, I could say one thing. When I went through some of the court proceedings, because I had used corporal punishment throughout my parenting, my oldest is 33, my baby is 11. I know that at a certain point, spankings no longer are an effective tool for discipline, and you have to gauge when you get to that point if you do indeed use corporal punishment. Different people have had different schools of thoughts throughout the years. Some have said, from the waist down belongs to you as long as you're not breaking any skin and
that is correct.
Marks and doing all
We've heard that.
And then some will say, well, that's not entirely true. So it kind of depends on who is looking at your case, whether or not they view what you're doing as abuse or just things that are in line with punishment. I can tell you that I was outraged when one of my children who suffers from seizures was struck in the head. And that was not considered abuse because corporal punishment was something that was used in my home. So you have to be very careful about how you discipline your children. You never know if you're going to end up in a situation like mine where your life is going to be under a magnifying glass, and how you have chosen to discipline your children may come back to bite you. And so for me, there was a line in the sand, and when you cross a certain level in the line in the sand, it's abuse.
I listen. I fully agree. I fully agree with it. Yes, Dawn, I agree with you. Discretion is such a expansive word. Yes. When you say discretion, it is very expansive, and you have no idea where it is. All we're looking for in our thing, what domestic violence or intimate partner violence, is a fair system. We do not have a fair system right now in Delaware. Now, we didn't mention any judges or commissioners or courtrooms that are doing the dirty, but I guarantee you, just talk to some people. You will find out what judges and what commissioners are giving the abusers more ammunition to abuse you. And victims have very little rights. So I'm going to leave it there because I'll probably put it on my OnlyFans page. Yes, we have the hard talk is on OnlyFans. That's where I could curse and tell you the real deal. And no, I'm not taking my clothes off on my OnlyFans page, but I will curse a lot on there. So if you ever went to a Bernie Mac concert, and it hurts your ears, you may not want to hear me on my OnlyFans. But go there because I got great content, man. Again, we don't like to have a lot of that foolish energy. A lot of the bills, a lot of the stuff that we see in our politics about domestic violence is very foolish energy. I wrote that down because it's not just It's not just the politicians that need to get their act together. It's you and me and everybody in our community need to get our act together when we're talking about this domestic violence. It seems as though in the beginning of the Me Too movement, which they swung it all the way over to the other side and messed it up. And then, you dig what I'm saying? That we were going in the right direction, and then we eased back into giving abusers a lot more rights again. So I think we need to just get a fair system like we do, and stop following these clout chasing lames. Man, these clout chasing lames out of here are just ridiculous. They're just doing whatever political or what we call PACs want them to do, depending on what they want for that month. What do you say about that, sis?
I call it feel-good legislation.
Yes.
We put things out there that make people feel good, but at the end of the day, don't really change their bottom line or make a tangible difference. And you have to be wise enough to look at it and say, what have these people who have been in office for all these years really done to make meaningful, impactful change in my existence? And that's my measuring stick. And I encourage everybody else to use that measuring stick because it's called accountability. And if you don't have these folks held accountable for your vote, then you're just as guilty as they are for doing you wrong.
You're right. And thank you again, Dawn. She said, Dawn put on here, preach. She said, gaslight is the first rule of it. Yeah, and let me just say that if you're going through this stuff right now, and I've got a family member that's going through it right now, you could be 8 or 83 going through domestic violence right now. It has no type of time limit or age limit. Believe you me, I know because I've got a family member going through this town. But let me just say this. This is what I had to give them. I would give my brothers or sisters the same advice I'm giving you right now. Sometimes these bad events can free you. Now, I'm not trying to minimize a terrible event or blank, but I want you to understand these things can liberate your senses because it can wake you to up. Once you go through a domestic violence, and again, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, sometimes it takes you 7 times to go through a violent event for you to catch up. They say this, but once you have had enough, it can free you and liberate your senses, and it can keep you out of staying in that box. The box that they want you to stay in, your abusers want you to stay in. It can free you, but you got to have the fortitude and you have to be consistent. And you're right. And Dawn's just blowing it up. Big shout outs to you, Dawn Riley. Big shout outs to you, Sparkles Fly. Yeah, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't. And listen, I do some people from the LGBTQ plus community wanted to talk about this as well. I have seen it. You've seen it on Dateline. You've seen it on 2020. You've seen it on 60 Minutes. All of those murder shows that they got out there. And Lord knows, let me just say this. Television has too many murder shows. Guess how much violence you see every day on your television. And it doesn't matter whether you're streaming it on Netflix. We live in a very violent culture. Let that sink in with y'all. And we have been living in a violent culture since the beginning of television. Do not tell me that Lone Ranger wasn't violent. Do not tell me about Gunsmoke, Bugs Bunny and all. Violent. Violent and believe me, and racist, because I told you I was going to talk about Rickety Rocket, that crap. But we live in a culture that we get violence all the time. Let me tell you, one of my favorite shows, I'm a big fan of Law and Order. And one of the Law and Order was SVU, Special Victims Unit. Mm-hmm. And I had stopped watching it for a long time because it was like a rape a week on the show. I had stopped watching that one. Where Law and Order, you had some other things. It wasn't all about rape. It wasn't always about murder. But I mean, I had stopped watching this. And now with the advent of 60 Minutes, Dateline, and 2020, and all these other murder shows out there, if you watch ID or the true crimes thing, all you see is murder, 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 murder. The same old stuff that you see all the time. And then we wonder why
people are desensitized to it.
Hello.
We've normalized the culture. It's acceptable.
Hello. Yeah. So I'm just to piggyback. I know I went off on a tangent, but let me just go back here. Bad events can free you. So if you're going through this right now, just think about that you're going to be free. You're freeing yourself. What do you have advice for people who are going through it right now?
Oh, you could get an amen from me all day long. As difficult as it is day by day to go through the court battles, all of the crying moments, all of the moments where I doubt whether I've done the right thing or not, the comfort that I have every single day is that I'm one day closer to the freedom. And that is enough for me. And sometimes you have to just land on the step that you're in and live in the light of that particular step for the moment. And if all that you can do is just think to yourself, I'm not spending another day with my abuser. I'm a day closer to not having to deal with the situation anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Let that be a comfort to you as you go through. And you've got to have something higher than this plane that we live on right now to sustain you. For some, that's a faith and something that transcends this earth, which I have. Faith,
belief, whatever it is that you got.
You want to call it. Sometimes that might just be another human being that you find a safe space in to go to be able to tell your truths to. Now, we talked about that and we said we can't share our stories to everybody because we all have a Judas somewhere in our camp. I think I've counted 2 in mine.
Yes. We talked about that. If you don't remember, we talked about that 2 weeks ago.
Yes, we did. So, be careful who you confide in. We talked about, possibly seeking out some therapy. If you can find someone who will give you good counsel, not those wannabe counselors that are inside of your circle, but somebody.
And Instagram is not a good counselor.
No, it's not. Somebody who's a trained professional, and helping you be able to cope and navigate this, because the level of emotion that you're going to go through is paramount to and comparable to a roller coaster. So you're going to have your highs, you're going to have your lows, you're going to have your in-betweens. You're going to have to find something somewhere that sustains you throughout this journey. But just know that the day will come when you will be liberated from your abusive situation, and it's going to be a travailing of sorts to go through, but you're going to make it to the other side.
It's going to be your second life. You're going to Sister Donyale said something, and I really want to piggyback on that about your support system. So a lot of women and men, when they're going through this domestic violence thing, they don't have a real good support system. Well, let me just talk to you about your support system. And we talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I'm just going to give you a little tidbit. A lot of people in your support system are not part of your support system. They're really traitors to you. They're telling your abusers everything that you're going through. So again, once you start to free yourself from this box, once you start to free yourself and these limitations, you're going to see people for what they really are and not what you want them to be. Your support system is very important in any type of situation. And if you have a support system and you think that you have a leak, you have a leak. And let me tell you something, your leak may not be the person that you think it is. It could be somebody even as intimate as an aunt, a mother, a father, a sister, who think that you should stay in this situation for better or for worse, for sicker or for poorer. And with those ideas, as long as somebody busting you upside your head, those ideas are wrong. When it goes to that particular point, I could take a lot of stuff, but once you put your hands on me, all bets are off. I can't raise you and raise the kids. I'm sorry. That's just how it got to be. What do you say about that?
Amen.
Listen, and too many of us are holding on to that crazy narrative. Too many of us are holding on to that narrative in our heads for way too long. This is the reason why somebody can call up to a show and say, well, I was getting beat up for 2 years. And I'm just saying to myself, my God, you're getting beat up for 2 years? Why are you there? Because you're holding that crazy narrative in your head. That's where the freedom comes in. Now, you're right, Dawn. That's where the freedom. Let this particular bad event free you. That's important. All right, y'all. I'm gonna be right back with another video. We're gonna close out some more stuff. We're getting a lot of stuff in here. I'll be right back with the Hard Talk with Jakim show.
A few months ago, I did a podcast talking about how my ex-wife shot me. A clip of that video went viral. Here it is. Now, if you know that story, you know that I was holding our 2-year-old son during an argument. My ex-wife pulled a gun on me, shot me in the forearm. The bullet went through my forearm, grazed his forehead. Then she pointed the gun at my face and squeezed the trigger, and the gun jammed. God protected me. What you don't know is that I divorced her immediately. I got custody of our son, and she did 3 years in prison. She went on with her life. I went on with mine. Quick update, she just got arrested for murdering her boyfriend. It's all over the news. A Georgia woman was arrested years after the body of a man was found in an Alabama shallow grave. Long story short, she found out her boyfriend was cheating, shot him in the head 3 times while he was asleep.
So we're going. All right, y'all. Y'all heard it. I played this for you last week. I played it for you again today because I want you to understand that man, that comedian, he had an actor. He had his own kid in his arms, and yet she still fired the gun, and yet she got arrested for murder. Now she's facing some other stuff. Yes, that is right. Thank you, Dawn. Yes, right. Good for him. We do have a couple of more things before we get out of here. Let me just give you a little bit of stuff that I jotted down just real quick. Let me tell you something. We're in a big wide world out here, and we have to learn a lot about a lot of different things. It is your job to learn these things. It is not anybody else's. There's only one person who's going to free you from this stuff, and it's going to be you. Nobody else can free you with this thing. I love one of my favorite movies of the last 20, 30 years was The Matrix. And a lot of people didn't understand The Matrix. And the blue pill, red pill is 100% correct. I am 100% red pill all the damn time. I want truth because I want to be able to see what's coming after me. I want to be able to see what's going on. I don't want you to cover up anything. And that's just my thing. What do you feel about that, sis?
I'm just kind of curious. The blue pill and the red pill, you think they had anything to do with politics?
Yes. Well, you know what?
We're not going to go there. We're not going to go there.
I don't even think it had, because remember, the red and blue was made up by television stations, and they did it. But the red pill and blue pill is so important that you understand truth. And don't try to cover crap up. Let me give you this. I saw this on the internet, and I'm gonna play this for you real quick.
Imagine a portal opened up, and the person who stepped out was the best version of yourself from another universe who possessed everything you wish you had. The best version of you is deep within yourself. You have to find him by yourself. No one's going to help you but you.
Yes, no one's going to help you but you. Imagine a person came out, and we were just talking about The Matrix, and still talking about domestic violence. I want you to see the correlations. Imagine another Donyale came out of a portal that had gone on through all of this stuff and had became the best version of Donyale or the best version of Jakim. You know what they would tell you? They would tell you to stay consistent. Stay in the fight. Like Dawn said, stay in the fight. Stay in it because the best version of you is on its way. I want you to know that. You have anything else?
I don't. The Matrix was one of those movies. I had to go back and watch it a couple of times.
Yes. And then you finally got it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the original Matrix. We're not talking about the other ones that came after it. And, we have no time. And the reason why I like the Matrix is because it was telling you that don't believe everything you hear. The media tells you Don't believe your eyes. Believe what I tell you. Don't say anything about it. Don't question it. Don't question. The other day we had Sinclair Broadcasting, and a big shout out to all the people that have to be forced to work for such a piece of crap company like Sinclair Broadcasting. Big shout out to y'all. But they had the same local media market. I just saw it. It was on Joe Rogan's podcast and all, and they had the same script on all of these local media. 54 local medias would say the same thing. Always putting the black folks out there doing the crime, not doing anything about other folks doing crimes and doing crimes in high places. Same thing. That's what they're trying to teach you. And that's what they're trying to indoctrinate you with. We call it conditioning. And the same thing in domestic violence. They're trying to condition you into a way that they want to, that where they could control you, have their cake and eat it too. Now, let me just say this. And I did say to some of the people, there was a bunch of men that sent me a bunch of emails and wanted to, and all of them think they're alphas. And, you know, if you're an alpha, you don't have to tell anybody. Everybody knows. So that automatically tells me you're an alpha. All right. But when you have a situation that you have to put your hands on this woman, and we've all made the mistakes and all did the thing, but you constantly have to, I can guarantee you're not an alpha. I can guarantee that. I can guarantee that if you go to your little men's club or whatever the things that they be grooming people on, or, you know, I'm not a big person on the Masons and all that other stuff, whatever they're grooming you on, and you go there and you're smoking your cigars and you think you're an alpha, but yet you got to come home and beat your wife, I can guarantee you're not an alpha. If you have to tell people that you're an alpha, you're not an alpha. You're the betas. You're the Charlies. You're the Deltas. You're the Echoes. I could go down the whole phonetic military line if you want, but you're all of those that are not. So again, who would want a person like that? Who would want to be able to control their woman to the point that they have to put their hands on them? And if you are one of those people, you need to stop it. You need to regroup. What do you say about that?
I say that people who seek to control and cannot seek to destroy you as well. So you have to think about that as well. So that's where I find myself.
Yes.
In this predicament. I could not be controlled, and so I'm out to be destroyed. And my abuser promised me that was what he was going to do if I decided to leave. And so. But
you won't let him.
No.
No, don't let him.
That's right.
Don't give in.
That's right.
Don't give up.
That's right.
Don't push as hard as you can, because these cowards, these people that do it, they are cowards. Now, let me just say this. Yes, I almost lost my train of thought there. The reason why I got a bunch of other men were sending me stuff was that, yes, women can be abusers. We all know that. We all know that. If you ever watch young girls, they're some of the meanest people out there. I am so sorry to say it. I have a bunch of girls, and I'm telling you now, I have a bunch of daughters, and I have sons. They are some mean people. They may not physically put their hands on you, but the manipulation in these things are outrageous. Yes, women can be abusers. They most likely are going to be emotional and verbal abusers. Men are mostly physical and verbal, but mostly women are emotional and verbal. They'll do the whole thing where they powder out doing the thing. You know the things. I ain't got to tell you. You want to see some stuff, like go watch Kevin Samuels. You have to watch Jakim. Go watch Kevin Samuels on that, or some other nonsense. But what I will say is that if this is your modus operandi, you need to change it now, because they're coming after you. they're going to take your money. They're going to take your stuff. You ain't going to have anything. And it just ain't good. It ain't good to teach children this type of culture. Do you want to end on anything in particular?
Again, if you are suffering in a situation where you are experiencing domestic violence, get help. It's there. It can be found. I'll leave Jakim with my contact information. If you want some help, if you want me to point you into some directions, having been tried and burned by the fire, I could probably point you in some helpful directions. So I'll leave my contact information for you to be able to reach out if you need to be connected to someone who can get you the help. But don't sit and suffer in silence, not one more day.
All right. And she's absolutely right. And she also wanted to tell you about Senate Bill 4 that we need you to call. What day?
The 28th in Lake Hall in Dover, Delaware at 11 a.m. You can enter your public comment. Get there early so you can get your name on the list to speak. They generally will give you 1 to 2 minutes, depending on whether you're affiliated with an organization or not. If you're just an individual that wants to come and weigh in on the conversation, get down to Dover, come up to Dover, depending on where you are in the state of Delaware. Outside of the state of Delaware, I don't know if you know somebody in the state of Delaware, but have somebody come and let your voice be heard. These legislators are elected to be a representation of your voice, and they don't know what to represent if they don't hear your voice. So it's important that you let them know how you feel about these and all other forms of legislation that's out.
Yes. And I don't know if you can do public comment through the, I know in the committees we can do it through virtual, but I don't know if you could do public comment for something that's out of the committee that's now on the floor. But before we leave, and that's very important, that's the 28th?
28th.
All right, the 28th, 11 o'clock, Legislative Hall, Dover. Get it in there. Something that hit national news before we leave out of here today, and I really wanted to get her opinion on it because, believe you me, she has a very good mind. I like her mind. Delaware wants to give corporations the right to vote like people. One person, one vote. Well, if corporations are people, it only makes sense that corporations get the right to vote. Yes, there is a municipality here in Delaware, in the land of Joe Biden, that wants to give corporations the right to vote. To me, this is madness. This is the madness that we deal with in our state. I love the state. Don't love what the laws are going on in here. If they commit crimes, ask me. If we could give corporations the ability to vote, if they commit crimes, can we now put corporations in jail? Is this democracy? People eventually die, but corporations can live forever. So I don't know. This seems like one of the wrong, dumbest things out here to do. I will keep you posted on if this gets passed.
Let me just chime in on this. I've done hundreds, almost 1,000 of corporations in Delaware. And there are a lot of people who choose to make Delaware their corporate home and don't have an office here and don't make Delaware their physical location. So that is problematic on a lot of levels, because then that means that we're giving outside interest a say in how we run our state.
That is correct.
State laws.
Yes. And I'm glad you chimed in.
Yes.
That is yes, this is wrong for Delaware. And let me just say this. If they do it here in Delaware, it's going to spread across the country. So we have to, Delawareans, we have to nip this here. No, maybe corporations already have been purchasing elected officials for years. Well, they don't need to have the right to vote. That definitely don't need to have the right to vote. So I'm going to drop those heavy hands on that, and I'll keep you posted on there, and we'll give it to him. Yes, Dan Ward said, yeah, that's stupid. yes. And I love simplicity, because simplicity is always good. Yes, this has been the Hard Talk with Jakim, and our guest host today has been Donyale Hall, and she's been great here. We're going to have her back also for the political roundtables, but we're not finished with domestic violence. We're going to see other things, and we're going to have her back for more. This was the part 2. go and check out the part 1 on YouTube at Delaware Info Now. If you want to send me an email, that's btom6164@gmail.com. That's btomp6164@gmail.com. So I'm going to leave you with something that's going to inspire you or make you even more angrier. The young lady being shot in Florida when she wanted to speak to the neighbors about throwing stuff and racial stuff. But listen to my man Toussaint Morrison from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Big shout out to you, Toussaint. Here it goes. Peace. We'll see you again. Peace.
I want you to know, after Susan Louise Lorenz shot and killed Ajike A.J. Owens for knocking on her door to address Susan throwing a skate at black children for playing near Susan's house, it was reported that some of the black children said they felt responsible for the killing of Ajike. When I say black codes, when I say loitering, look no further than the first laws implemented after enslaved black people were freed to check black bodies being in white spaces. Those laws also supported white people killing black people for speaking, looking at white people, or even expressing joy in the form of dancing. So look no further than today to see that black codes and loitering laws are still very much so alive. And when acts of racial violence like this occur, it absolutely breaks my heart to hear black children who witnessed it happen feel any fiber of culpability for it happening. Of course it's not their fault. And perhaps that's a function of racial violence, to make you feel responsible for something that happened to you and exonerate those that carry